Started. Wow. This is the earliest in the day we've recorded, and that's just because Allie's in France. So it's like for me, it's an 8-hour difference. So she's like gonna be jumping on at 9 p.m. her time. So
Yeah.
But
I think we did some early ones early on. I remember doing them during the day a little bit, like because I was coming from like tripping or something, and I came in and I was like midday. But yeah, we haven't done an early one in a long time.
Yeah,
it's been a minute.
Yeah. But that's all right as long as everybody's able to do it, right?
Ready to go.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I like when I do Last Born podcast stuff. It's it's always earlier in the day if I can help it. I like doing interviews in the morning, afternoon, but but it looks like Allie's joining. Oh, dude, I think we can have her join in, I guess. Yeah, cool. Might as well, right?
Cool.
Yeah, bring her in. What's going on?
Hey, Allie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Sorry,
I could see you too.
I didn't want to be early. I just because usually it takes me 20 minutes to update shit.
I
guess this time I don't have to. So
yeah,
that's right.
Sorry.
If you want to come in now, we're just hanging out. We were just gonna talk a bit. But
hold on. Let me just. It's being weird. Hold on. My computer's shit, so it takes a second sometimes. Okay.
That's fine.
I think. Hold on. Let me close other things. That's gonna help me.
Yeah, it'll help.
Okay. Yeah, I have like 97 tabs open. So wait.
There you go. That sounds like me.
Okay. Wow, I got sunburn yesterday. Shit. Oh well. Okay. Okay. Hi.
No, spring is here. Spring is here. Attack! Anti-throw!
Hey.
Hi, Allie. I am really happy you're here because
thank you.
You get to meet Forrest and Mike. Mike, I don't know how it looks on your screen. Mike's the guy with the beard in the corner.
I see. Yeah, you're here. Yeah. Mike's here. You don't even see
Pickleball Jesus.
Pickleball Jesus.
I see everybody. Hold on, I'm just gonna make my phone quiet so that it doesn't. I'm trying to do all those preparatory things so that.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, we have some time here to sort of get settled.
And yes, okay.
Yeah, so there's Mike in the corner and Forrest and then of course myself and everyone. This is Allie. Allie's a virtual friend.
Allie.
Just like how we all haven't none of us have met each other in person, but we're all friends. Or I'm friends with all of you at least. So that's how it goes, right?
Yes. Very much so.
Facebook and podcast stuff just like connects people. So
that's the worst thing of all, right? I mean, like think about it. Like all of us just across like countries, the oceans and the whole nine, and we only can speak with each other because we identify with each other, but we're so far apart. That's the crazy thing about this thing.
It's pretty fucking crazy. I agree.
There you go.
Well, what's funny, Allie, and that's why I wanted to bring you on because we were thinking of like who can we have, because it's like the mainstays is myself, Mike, and Forrest, and we have a few other guys come on and we chat about a lot of things, but we like to bring other people on and just maybe not treat it so much as an interview, but just as a conversation, and just. And I was thinking about you in particular because I think we're all kind of aligned on a lot of subjects, but like when I met you, you had moved from the U.S. to France. At least I don't know how long it had been at that point because we've known each other at least a few years.
Yeah, we first interview I think I did with you was about the ZAD, so that would have been April 2017. So I had been here.
Oh my God.
April 2018. So I've been here 5 years next month. So we started talking like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And time flies because time isn't real.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's been a while. Yeah. It's weird.
I think that's kind of like the same thing with Mike and I and Forrest. Like I've had them on the podcast before too, and like I was actually thinking today, like when did we start this podcast? Because this was like. Because I was thinking how, like, when I introduce people to it, I'm like, it's called Attack and Dethrone Godcast, which is such an absurd weird name. Like no one knows what to think about, like what that even means. But it
what
started
is this about? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like a joke, right? Like we were the time. It was in 2020, and a group of us were just like joking about, wouldn't it be funny if we started a podcast that was called Attack and Dethrone God Cast, and then it just like turned into a real thing. And so we've been talking about once a month, give or take. And yeah, just kind of commiserating on what's happening in the U.S. and kind of with what we all think of as a collapse that's happening, right? Like the empire's collapsing in on itself, and it's a fucking bumpy ride. And so we started this in 2020 when I think we all kind of wanted a little bit of a support group type of like dynamic where we're like, look, like this year is fucking wild. Like, let's just try to make sense of it the best we can. And anyway, thinking about you, like you kind of, when I think about you, I think about somebody who saw a lot of this stuff that's currently happening. Like you didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but you were like, I need to get the fuck out of the US while it's still okay to pull that off. Like I can still do that. Like my impression of you is someone that's a little prescient and just was like, I need to get out when the...
I'm listening. I'm just walking inside because it's starting to rain, of course.
Yeah.
Even though the weather just told me the rain is ending. But
yeah,
they're wrong. Okay. But yes,
yeah.
Continue. I'm still listening. I'm just moving.
No, you're good. I just think that your story like fits into kind of what we've talked about on this. Like we're all trying to figure out how to like navigate an increasingly complicated and difficult time, you know, and like I don't know if I can speak for Mike or Forrest, but I think we've all thought about like, should we just get the fuck out of the US? Like, is that worth it? You know, like, is this the right move, or should we just figure out a good place here that will make sense to live through everything that's now happening, right? Like,
yeah, and it's still to come. It's still coming. It's
right.
Sorry to be a further, I don't want to sound like a further poo-poo, but it's
no, it is like we're all on the same page.
No, we're really upbeat here.
Yeah, we're an optistic crew. Yeah,
we're super positive.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I feel like I feel like I'm always either like the poo-poo or the Cassandra, and both are very uncomfortable positions to the point where lately, like, things are so fucking bad. I've just kind of stayed quiet. Like, I don't have much to add at this point because, like, I told you so makes me sound like an asshole, and I don't really like to sound like an asshole. So, and I have like not much to add lately because like so many other people who used to like ask me what the fuck is going on, they've all kind of caught up, and I'm just like, cool, my job here is done. I'm gonna make cute things out of clay now.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not
playing
really,
pickleball, so
I haven't completely detached, but it has been kind of this weird evolution for me as someone who, a lot of people, frankly, I told me I was crazy 5 years ago, and now those same people are like, oh shit. And I'm like,
yeah.
Why do you think I did that thing where I sold everything I owned and ran away 6,000 miles, not knowing how? It was like, it wasn't just a midlife crisis. Like, that was a piece, but it wasn't, just that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're probably at the point in your life where you're willing to make really risky, big decisions, but, it wasn't unfounded. It was a calculated decision. And of course, you didn't know, like, how it would play out because there's too many factors to, like, plan for. But yeah, you seem, I want to ask you, like, how is it? Like, you've been there now, what you said, 5 years. So I don't even know what your status is. Like, you were talking about like trying to become a citizen. I know that you got married.
As of last week, I am I have like the equivalent of a green card. Like, I'm here.
Oh wow!
Like,
congratulations!
I'm here for the next 10 years, and I pretty much I can do everything except vote.
Oh, okay.
Which, and as in about 3 months, theoretically, I can ask for citizenship. Mm-hmm. But the amount of paperwork I need is so daunting that I'm not, especially because the only thing I can do is vote, and the next important election is not for 5 years anyway, because we just had that whole presidential thing happen here. Mm-hmm. So I'm not in a huge rush to do it because that's the only thing that would change. And the amount, the dossier I need to ask for citizenship is just absurd. And actually, one of the reasons I'm going back to the U.S. in July for the first time since I left, first time in 5 years. And
oh, really?
Wow.
complicated emotions there, lots of complicated shit there.
Yeah, you're
but one
gonna
of the
have a fun
reasons
time.
is to try to start to track down the stuff I'll need just in case.
Right.
But yeah, no, I have, after 5 years, I have a like status that can't be threatened or taken away, really.
That's
which
good.
really, really, really fucking nice. That gives me, like, I can travel anywhere in the European Union without a passport.
Nice.
And it's beautiful.
And yeah, they're even gonna like kind of throw me like the it's like an equivalent of a minimum wage stipend that they give to workers here to make like the minimum wage into a living wage. I even qualify for that shit in like a couple months, which is really nice.
That is really nice.
So I get to be treated just like a regular French person, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Just at the point where they're trying to take all that shit away.
Right.
But hold on a second. I'm just okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just imagine, like, and you seem like you know French pretty damn well at this point, but I imagine trying to navigate the bureaucracy of becoming a French resident or citizen or whatever is like a fucking nightmare.
I mean, even for native French nationals, it's a nightmare. Like, people here have serious trauma around, I mean, the word bureaucracy comes from the French word for desk, it's like, that's
yeah.
It's legendary. It is legendarily horrible. And even though they've tried to reform it and make it easier, I mean, I get ads on Facebook all the time. Just for example, there's several companies who, like, what they do is you pay them to navigate the bureaucracy for you. And it's like, it's aimed at people because of a language barrier. But I can also tell that I'm sure they get plenty of Americans and also Brits who, like, for me, it's not the language. Like, my French is basically fluent. The only time it's not truly fluent is when I'm around teenagers, because they just have lots of words that.
Well, that's the same. Like, you grow up in wherever, and the language well.
Like, you listen to a rap song and you're like, what the fuck are they saying? It's the same thing listening to French teenagers. But aside from teenagers, my French is fluent. But yeah, it's also just not understanding how the system works. There's just this whole different mentality. And they make it hell every step of the way. It's the one thing that everybody agrees on. Probably maybe the only thing that absolutely everyone agrees on in this country, whether you're a French national or an immigrant, whether you're far right or far left or whatever. Like, how horrible the bureaucracy is the one thing you will never find anyone defend. No one's going to defend it. Even people who work there, they know how horrible it is. Yeah. They get paid well. That's why they're there. But even they know. And so, I just went through like the last hoop jumping to get my residency card. And like, even though I can ask for citizenship, that last round of hoop jumping was like traumatic enough that I'm kind of like, I'm good for now. Like, I'm just going to sit back and not have to go. I don't have to go to the prefecture for 10 years. Cool. I have a card that says 2032, which is weird because, the collapsolog in me is like 2032. Are we going to have a state bureaucracy in 2032? Like,
God, I hope not.
The idea of waiting 10 years to renew, like, I don't. Okay, yeah, cool. 10 years. I'm fine. Yeah.
Whenever I look at like any paperwork or any sort of, like, if I get anything done and it's like, oh yeah, like this will expire in like 10 years or whatever, I'm like, will this even fucking matter in that? It's hard to even imagine what anything would look like in 2032, which is only 10 years from now.
Yeah, but I look at 10 years ago and
yeah. Right.
And even me, doom and gloom that I was, there was many aspects of this that I predicted, but many aspects of it, like the whole pandemic thing, that was not on my radar. That
I think that's for all of us.
Despite being a fan of all those like outbreak type movies in the 90s, somehow I totally missed the boat on that one. And that's fine. I don't want to know everything in advance. It's creepy.
Yeah.
But
it is creepy.
It's kind of funny for me when I look at there's certain things I was like, that one doesn't surprise me at all. But that whole like having to stay home here for 6 months, like, ooh, that was a little kink that I didn't see coming.
Yeah. I don't think any of us could have
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I thought
I'll say this.
Motherfucker on there. I did not see the pandemic fucking us up like it did. That was the one thing. And I had books, audio books, and I said, "God damn it, I missed that one. I missed the boat.
I will give my credit for this. I did see how bad it would be as soon, like when the French government was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks and everything's going to be fine." That's, that again, I felt like, nope. This ain't going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
This ain't going to be 2 months. No, yeah. I mean that, I'd written one of the last pieces I wrote for Guards and Radicals, and that was basically it. I wrote it the first week of the confinement, and I was kind of like, and it was basically about my last week of what I knew would be the last week of freedom. Yeah. And I read it two years later, and it's kind of creepy because like I was like, nope, this is the end of the world as we know it, kids. Like this is not. We're not going back to the bar in 2 weeks. Like,
yeah.
Well, unless you're in Wisconsin, they didn't stop.
Well, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, I don't live there anymore, but I know those folks, and no pandemic's going to stop them going from a tavern.
Yeah, damn Skippy, right?
Here, at least, and very little things can keep French people from a bar anyway. But the government mandating them be closed for months at a time, that'll do it.
Yep.
Yeah. How is it like there in France right now? I mean, I could just say here, I know you know this already, but in the US, it's kind of just like there's no mandates anywhere, regardless of like if it's Democrat or Republican majority states. Yeah. Like Forrest is in Texas, Mike, you're in New Mexico. I'm here in Washington State now. So like dramatically different approaches, I would say, probably between like say Washington and Texas. But France, even more so than the entirety of the United States, I'm sure, is like dramatic.
Right now, it's not. I mean, the one big difference between the U.S. and France is, here's everything centralized. So, each region didn't get to decide their policies. It was decided at a national level. It was not. It was not not anywhere. Sorry, English. It was not anywhere near as politicized here as it was there. It was slightly politicized, but not the way that the right calls the left calls the right plague rats and the right calls the left virtue signalers. There's this whole enormous politicization of it there that never happened here. But as of it was just 2 weeks ago, I guess, that our health minister took off the last mandate, which was wearing a mask on all public transportation. So it's optional everywhere now. And most people aren't wearing masks. And, I hesitate to compare it to the situation there. It's not right versus left. And it's kind of different culturally. It's complicated. Yeah. And I'll admit there's a lot of places, I'm I think a little more cautious around it maybe than some people. But there's still a lot of places that, I'm not wearing a mask either. I will wear one on a fucking train though. I'm sorry if I'm going to be in a little box for 2 hours with no windows open with a bunch of other people.
Makes sense, right?
Like to wear a mask. That to me is just common sense.
Yeah.
But who's not wearing one does not signify anything here the way it has signified something there for the past couple of years. That's definitely very different. And here, it's also just not as big of a risk here for so many reasons. First of all, there's not as many disabled people. There's not as many immunocompromised people. There's universal health care. There's, mandated sick leave. There's so many stop gaps to disaster here that don't exist there. That for people here, it's not if they get sick, it's not as potentially as much of a big deal. And after 2 years of being overall under much stricter mandates than most of the United States was, people are just kind of done. They've decided they're going to live with the risk.
Yeah.
And, this is also a culture that overall has accepted risk. One of the cultural differences, I think, between Europeans and Americans as a whole is, people accept risk here a little more because history, at least history for white people who were born here, has been riskier than the United States, where I'd say there's been more of a line of stability throughout the course of the nation, and less risk.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So people here are willing to accept a little more risk. And there's also there was a lot of trauma around certain aspects of the pandemic, especially the what I call the Big Brother aspect, that hit very differently here because of the history here, especially the history around World War II, the history around the occupation. The overall, attitudes toward police here aren't politicized either. Nobody thinks the cops are the good guys.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's just, there's no back the blue movement in France. And there's ACAB graffiti all over everywhere, so there's different cultural dynamics at play.
I think in one of our conversations you had kind of really it's interesting how much in the US we project our own cultural dynamics and how we politicize everything onto other countries, so we assume what's happening there is similar to what happens here, but there's definitely there's a far right hyper nationalist movement in France, right?
Yes.
Very, very racist and all that, but you talked about the public health stuff. I was just thinking about, you mentioned there is universal health care, and it doesn't seem like, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like the far right or the more leftist parties in France are divided on whether or not people should have access to affordable or cheap or free health care, right? That's just a thing that everyone. Yeah.
Anything having to do with, what the American right would talk about as welfare or handouts. Yeah. Those are things that the left and the right are united on here. And it's pretty, when I talk to people about the far right here, and don't get me wrong, the far right here is terrifying. I mean, me as an immigrant, even being a white immigrant, I am terrified of if and ever the far right takes hold in France. That being said, if you put aside their racism and nationalism, and I'm not saying that's a minor thing, but for the sake of argument, if we put aside their racism and nationalism, the far right in France is far to the left of the fucking Democratic Party of the United States.
Yeah.
They are very strong pro-welfare system. They're supporting free university. They're supporting a rise in the minimum wage. They are supporting keeping the retirement age as it is, as opposed to Macron, who wants to raise it. They are extremely pro-universal healthcare. They are extremely pro-mandatory maternity leave and paternity leave. They are super strong, throwing money at would-be parents. Now, the reasons why are less than kosher, so to speak. And who they do and don't want to have those benefits is what distinguishes them from the far left. The far left wants everybody to have it. They don't care if you're an undocumented immigrant. They don't care who the fuck you are. They want everyone to have those things because it's a matter of ethics and decency. The far right just wants French-born people to have it and wants to very, very strongly restrict. I see Forrest with his thumbs up.
Yeah, because I think
they want to very strongly restrict who gets to be a French national. And and that's how they create that divide, and it's brilliant, frankly. I mean, the Republican Party could take lessons on this. I'm not saying they should, but one of the reasons you had so many people who weren't voting for Marine Le Pen because of the racism. They weren't voting for her because of the nationalism. They were voting for her despite it, because Macron's been trying to strip away every fucking social benefit that they've relied on for the past 5 years. And Marine Le Pen is sitting here going, oh no, I'm going to raise the minimum wage. Oh no, I'm going to make sure no one under 30 has to pay income tax. Oh no, I am going to, but only for French citizens. Mm-hmm. So the average French citizen living in a rural area who's been ignored and neglected and has been fucked over by neoliberal policies, they were voting for Le Pen because economically she was to the left of Macron.
Interesting. It's wild.
And, but again, what you were saying, the American lens drives me nuts because, Americans can't conceive of a far right that would be pro-maternity. Of course they want to be pro-maternity leave because they want mom in the kitchen. And they know if they want mom in the kitchen, they got to fucking finance that shit. It's, because they know that trying, for example, what is the United States trying to do to combat the low birth rates? They're just trying to make abortion illegal. Here, the far right in their hearts, they don't like abortion. They also know full well it will never fly to try to restrict it.
Mm-hmm.
So they are going to try to increase the birth rate by bribing would-be parents economically and financially to have more children.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my personal observations, I don't have numbers in front of me, but I'll tell you, you know, I come from like an entire generation of folks, you know, I look at all of my American friends who don't have children for financial reasons, who wanted kids, didn't have them. And now, you know, kids I went to school with, you know, we're all 40 years old now, so you're on the verge of being too late. I don't know a single person here in France out of all my friends who didn't have children for financial reasons. I don't know a single person.
Yeah.
Because if you want to have a kid here, you are generously supported in doing so.
Right.
If anything, it is what, you know, the Republicans pretend welfare is in the United States, where it is actually to your advantage to have a child. You can live better having a kid than not having a kid if you are a poor person. And, you know, and that's like, you know, I hear this like, you know, one strain of thought from like the, you know, the cuckoo version of the US right being like, oh yeah, you know, these welfare mothers are just popping out kids for the government time.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, now we're forcing people to have children they don't want because your birth rate is so low. So it's like, yeah, actually, that's exactly what other Western nations do. They bribe people to have children because they understand the economics of the declining birth rate. And they, you know, and especially the United States, given the military industrial complex, you're going to need some fucking cannon fodder in 20, 30 years. And what COVID did to the already declining birth rate, you're not going to have it if you leave things as they are and don't offer any social welfare benefits. So what are you going to do? You're going to make sure people have children they don't want and that they can't afford, because those are going to wipe the ass of the rich and or be sent off to die in 20, 30 years.
Damn, I know why you went to France, because that is very despicable what you just said for the past 20, 30 minutes here in America. That's seen as like anathema as far as what is good in this world. So keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. I got you. Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting is that dynamic between the left and the right in France just wouldn't work. I'm trying to think of how to say this, because something that Forrest is really good at articulating is like how the left here in the US, the things that will bring like leftists in alignment with the far right, people that are supposedly on the left and the far right, is that like for the thing around COVID, right? Like any sort of restrictions, any mandates, any protections around COVID became like a trigger or something that like a lot of leftists just were like, we can't have this, and they become conspiracists about it, and before you know it, they're becoming like, they're anti-vax, and they think, you know, masks are tyranny, and then before you know it, they're going to the trucker convoy in Ottawa or whatever, you know. And I don't know, there's just something about like the things that divide the left and the right in France is like, they're like, no, we believe that everyone should have access. Well, we believe that we should have access to universal health care and all these other protections. But it's just about whether we want immigrants and people who are non-citizens or people that are not French-born, whether they get it or not. You know,
who has it, and again, and it's the motivation behind why.
Right.
You know, though, I mean, the whole, you know, I'll put it for you know, because it's been the talk of everything this week, right? You know, the whole white genocide theory, the grand remplacement. You know, the modern version of that comes from France. The modern version of that came from a far-right French thinker who put it forth in the early 2000s. That's, I mean, the idea itself is older than that, but the latest iteration, the latest push came from a French, you know, wealthy, freaking bourgeois, far-right asshole named Renan Camus. And, you know, and he, you know, and that it hasn't taken off quite the same way here as it has there, but it's definitely at the root of why the far right specifically pushes the policies they do. They want to increase white births. You know, they will pay white French people to have children. That's their way of battling the great replacement, you know, and that idea much more subtle here, and we don't have the same kind of radicalism around it. You know, nobody is shooting up immigrant neighborhoods screaming about the Great Replacement the way that they are over there. Well, partially also because they don't have the same level of access to firearms. That's another thing. But
yeah.
you know,
no
but
doubt,
it's
no doubt.
you know, and there's also a piece here where, you know, you tiptoe into hate speech territory much quicker. And as opposed to the United States, hate speech here is punishable by law. So it's more subtle. But those ideas are definitely behind, you know, Marine Le Pen believes in those ideas. Eric Zemmour, who is like, you know, Marine Le Pen on steroids, who was the far right candidate in the last presidential election, who made Marine Le Pen look reasonable by comparison, which is what frightens me the most as someone who, you know, looks to the future. Like, we're at the point where Le Pen looked reasonable because of the stuff that Zemmour was saying. And Zemmour was a huge advocate of the Great Replacement theory. He's someone who's been prosecuted like 3 or 4 times for hate speech and found guilty a few times. But he's relentless because, you know, he's saving French culture from the Muslim invasion. And, you know, and he'll put that out, you know, he is very specific about that. Thankfully, he's also, at least at this point, fringe. And people who liked aspects of the far right's economic plan, but were turned off by his level of extremism. You know, that's one of the reasons why Marine Le Pen got so many more votes this time around than she did 5 years ago. And I'm terrified for 5 years from now, because like I'm just watching the trajectory here. But, you know, I mean, one of the huge differences is, you know, people here are much more economically savvy. They understand how the system works. The average French person understands how the system works much more than the average American person does. And people here are much more class conscious. And they've also had the benefit of having a front row seat to watching the neoliberal experiment in both the UK and the US over the past 4 decades. You had Reagan in the US, you had Thatcher in the UK, while you had Francois Mitterrand here in France, who was a socialist, who did the opposite of what Thatcher and Reagan did over that decade. You know, the decade between 1980 and 1990, life got much better for poor French people. Whereas things, you know, that was the root of how everything's going, you know, after those two, in respect, then you had, you know, Clinton's new left and fucking Tony Blair's new left. And you've had this like melding of leftism, I mean, you know, relative speaking, Democratic Party new leftism and neoliberalism that had led to the kind of degradation of quality of life that Trump took advantage of. So here people got to watch, they watched it for 30, 40 years. And they were like, nope, no, thank you. No, I mean, that was a huge part of what the Gilets jaunes, what the Yellow Vest movement was about. And the Yellow Vest movement is a perfect example of kind of what you were talking about, Patrick, where you had the left and the right who were extremely equally militantly, passionately united against neoliberalism. You had the left and the right united toward the center. I mean, it's the closest thing to the reality of horseshoe theory that I've ever seen, although not exactly that. But that's really what you had. You know, both of these sides were like, nope, no, thank you. We know what that does. And, you know, and that's been the heart of social struggle here in France for the past 5, you know, the only reason Macron won the first time and the only reason he won this time is because he wasn't Marine Le Pen. But at the same time, from the very beginning, he was extremely unpopular, has always been unpopular, is still unpopular. And the reason he's unpopular is because he's basically trying to Americanize France. He is basically trying to strip away the social safety net, to make things more competitive, to make things more business friendly, to widen the divide. I mean, the very first fucking thing he did as soon as he got into office was get rid of the wealth tax. That was like that was his day one move. Both the far left and the far right see this, and both of them were basically like, fuck no, and have continued to be fuck no. But it's also been, you know, a rather uncomfortable relationship because of what divides. You know, the Gilets jaunes was a clusterfuck. It was a somewhat effective clusterfuck, but you know, you had these masses of people in the street who were united against higher taxes, you know, this, that, you know, all the little pieces of what Macron was trying to institute. But at the same time, then you had the far right who was like, you know, beating up immigrants while doing their version of the Black Bloc. And then the far left who's beating up the far right for beating up the immigrants. And
Wow.
so you had this like internal chaos within what seemed otherwise to be a pretty united social movement. And then you had a lot of people, especially on the left, myself included, that, you know, watched, tried, you know, I supported aspects of it, but I just couldn't put myself out there on the streets because of the far right presence. I'm not going to march with Nazis. I don't care if both of us want a lower retirement age. I don't care if both of us want a higher minimum wage. I still can't bring myself to march with the people that will institute policies that will make it so that I can't get healthcare.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, but that's what's hard for the average. You know, one of the major differences between like a Trump and someone like Marine Le Pen is Le Pen's policies, much more so than Trump's, Marine's policies disproportionately affect those who can't vote. Much more so. You know, Trump's policies, part of them are aimed at that, but who they affect and who the far right affects in general. Again, you look at the abortion thing right now, affects a much bigger chunk of the country. Whereas Le Pen's policies greatly disproportionately affect those who don't have the right to vote in the first place, which puts her at a great advantage, because that's when you have to convince everyone else to put the needs of other people above their own needs. And we did it this time around. I'm not sure they'll do it next time around.
Right.
I'm going to interject.
No, yeah.
Right now, it's your homeboy. I'm just going to say one thing is like, I want to thank you for everything that you said over the past 20, 30 minutes. And the reason I'm saying that, no, it's that us and who we are, we need to get it out, right? It sometimes like our own parents, our siblings, our friends, family, you got to get it out. So I want to thank you for laying it down how it is you did. Because I love that. I'm looking at pickleball Jesus right now. And I know
whose dog's sitting in his dog driving me nuts.
No, I got you. Pickleball Jesus right now. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles in the 1980s. This brother was in Wisconsin, grew up. I know he worked. My man was in Idaho in '09. Is that sometimes when you have to say what you got to say, sometimes you got to shut the fuck up and let the people do their thing and say what it is they got to say. So I'm appreciative of everything it is that you said just now.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Be quite honest with you. So everything you said was 100% correct, and then we can chop it up about whatever. But I just wanted to let you know that you landed down like you did over the past 30 minutes without stutter or stammer. I was impressed. I'm like, damn. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, damn. No stutter or stammer. Anything that she's saying, goddamn, that's hard. But you did it. You did it, and I appreciate it. And that's why me and all of us are brothers and sisters in the joint. So
yeah. I mean, that's why that's like I thought of Allie. I'm like, I think this would be a good thing. I think everyone.
But frankly, and I appreciate having a platform because, you know, I sit here observing.
Yeah.
Every day. And, you know, there's not a lot of people to talk to about it.
Do you feel like
there's not a lot of Americans where I live. There's not, you know, and most of the hyper political people I know, you know, there's an understanding gap. In the same way that Americans don't understand French culture, in the same way that, like, you know, an American progressive does not understand what differentiates the French far right. It's, you know, the same goes on the other side. People over here have a really hard time understanding the reality. You know, going back to like what we were talking about before, why I left. I think people get it a little more now because the past 5 years have been such a shit show. But when I first landed here, you know, April March 2017, I show up here with 2 suitcases, 90 days to figure out how I'm going to stay, networking my ass off, talking to everyone I can, trying to just figure out what to do. And I would get into so many conversations with people being like, well, why would you leave the United States? And to me, they're like asking, why would you leave an abusive relationship? Like, that's how it sounded to me, because to me, that's what it was. Like, I just got out of a 35-year relationship of just being consistently gaslighted and lied to and told that there was nothing better than this. And, I'd spent a couple months in Europe and realized it was elsewhere, and then I fled. But the degree to which people here do not understand, they have this very, very romanticized image of the United States that in large part we can thank Hollywood and pop culture for, and the internet. And just the limited way, like I remember mentioning to people, well, it's really nice that everyone has health care. And they would be like, but wait, I thought President Obama gave everyone health care. Because people here truly believe, based on like the little clips of media that made it across the ocean, that the United States now had universal health care due to President Obama. And I'd be like, oh, no.
Allie, I'm sorry, I remember you was in a conversation we had. I don't know if it was recorded or not, but we had a conversation at one point, and you were saying, I think it was you were talking to some French people about the show Breaking Bad.
Oh, God.
Okay, yeah, and you were basically, you were explaining to them, they were like, wait, they thought it was so fantastical, like it was completely made up, that the idea that a man who was a high school teacher, who was obviously, and I think, and a chemist, would start making meth and getting involved in this like underground black market to afford cancer treatment and to make sure his family was taken care of if he died, because it would be so expensive if he died with all of these bills.
They really thought it was just a crazy Hollywood plot. What happened was I was invited.
No, that's real.
I was invited to what was like the equivalent of a frat party. It was like these college students I met at the bar, and they were just they want to practice their English, and they were just fascinated talking to me. So they invite me and my friend back to their place afterwards. And I walked through the door of their apartment, and there's this Breaking Bad poster, and I'm just like staring at it for a second, because like all of a sudden I'm brought back to thinking about the United States for a moment, and I must have frozen. And one of them was like, "Are you a fan of the show?" And I was like, "Not. It's a little close to home for me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to enjoy it." And he's like, "Why?" And then I explained, and just the look on his face, it had never occurred to him that that's based on reality. It had never, to him, this was just a crazy, whatever. And just watching his face when I'm saying, well, like I have friends who basically sell meth to pay for their medical treatment, and it's depressing. And I get that the show is clever, but the reality behind it, and just watching, and he was like a Sciences Po political science student. So, this kid was no dummy. Like,
yeah.
He was, real. I mean, that's one of the reasons him and I had been talking for a few hours in the first place. He was sharp, but he had never considered that the plot of that show isn't just a plot.
Hold up. Let me interject here.
Oh yes, please. Sorry.
It's not bad.
No, I don't give a damn. I mean, like, I want you to get it. I want you to get it all the fuck out. But let me interject here, because I work as an engineer.
Okay.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you a question. Is it that he's that sharp, or is it just that his unintelligence is not acknowledged because of a social aspect of like acceptance? And what I mean by that is like, I know I'm an engineer, electrical engineer, right? So it's not, when I do my thing, it's not about, oh, well, how anybody feels about good, bad, or whatever. It's like, does the shit work, right? So is it social acceptance when you say that this kid was smart, or is it that the shit is right? There's a big difference. Go. No, I'm asking. No, go. Go on, I'm saying
I interpreted him as smart personally, talking to him. Now, I will also say that the average French person generally is smarter than the average American person.
I agree with that. Yeah,
first of all, because the education system is better, and also because anyone who wants to go to university can, and there's mandated to be a place for anybody. But But political science is one of the few programs that is allowed to be selective. So anyone can be a university student. Not anyone can be a political science student. So it's kind of like being a law student here. There was a certain, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still dumb lawyers, of course, but there's a certain bar you have to pass where you have to, at least in theory, show that you're smarter than the average bear. And that's political science. They're seen as kind of an elite within the public university system here, given that we don't really have the Ivy Leagues quite the same way that you do there. They're seen as that. And I remember, he seemed very astute talking about many aspects of American politics. And I don't remember the details. This was 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
But he struck me as being intelligent, which I think was one of the reasons I was so shocked that he was so shocked. Because out of all the things that he had grokked about the United States, it just never occurred to him that that level of desperation. That's one of the things people here really don't. They see the good part, they see they're really into reality shows, for example. But one thing maybe I've pointed out to you, Patrick, before, but I've noted that neither Sister Wives nor Duck Dynasty have ever aired in France. They don't get the reality shows that show that other side. Yeah. 10 years ago, everyone was watching The Hills. Now everyone's watching the Kardashians. They get that view of America. Inner city kids here love the NBA. They're obsessed with American basketball. They want to go to the USA and make it. In many ways, the American dream feels stronger here than it does there. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's crazy, and it's really hard for me because, again, it feels kind of very often I'll end up in a conversation with someone, and it does kind of feel like a low-level gaslighting. They'll just start questioning things that I'm like, look, I moved here with $10,000 worth of medical debt and nothing, and please understand that I try to explain I would have been homeless in the United States, and they'll be like, oh no, you could have just gotten social housing. I'm like, no, that doesn't exist. No. You're on a Section 8 waiting list for 5 years, and then your number doesn't come up and you're fucked. Here I was able to get a housing stipend in 90 days as a foreign student. It was automatic. I just filled out the form, and in 90 days they're paying half my rent. And I was someone who was on a Section 8 waiting list. I was on not even the waiting list. I was on the lottery for the waiting list. And then my number wasn't called after 3 years in Oregon. So it's really hard. Being poor here is very different
than being poor in the United States.
French poor is not U.S. poor. It's not that people don't struggle, but there is still a cushion. It takes falling through a whole lot of cracks to be without anything here. And it's possible. But it's not like in the US where you get hit by a car and a month later you're sleeping in your car. That doesn't happen here.
Indeed.
And it's really hard for people to understand that it does, and that's kind of common.
Something was going on. I was hearing some
me too.
Yeah, I don't know what that was going on. It wasn't me. It wasn't your boy.
Is it when I'm talking?
No, I think it's Mike. And he's
Mike?
I'm trying to subtly chat with him, and he's like, "Fuck you," and I'm like, "All right."
Okay, I got you.
He's on mute right now. He can unmute. You gotta unmute Mike here.
Now, I'm gonna tell you something. That dude Patrick right here and Michael, I love him. Right? And I would kill for them. If somebody did something to them, I would kill for them. But I'm glad they brought you on because you there in French, and they don't even know this. I have somebody that I have lunch with once a month that is a French dude. His name is Jean Baptiste, one of my guys. And what you just said right now was everything that my man JB says.
Yeah.
Verbatim. That's the crazy shit. That's why I'm listening to you intently as far as what you're saying. It's it's crazy. Everything it is you said is the same thing it is that brother says to me when we have lunch once a month, and that's crazy. So I can't say like, man, JB said it, and you got, and then oh man, blah, 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 Ali said, no, but it's just crazy. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh shit, that's exactly what my guy says about here, there, and the whole nine. It's crazy. I apologize, but I just said, God, I'm sitting there like, I said, that's what my guy says, and he grew up there. What the fuck? So to say it how it is, I'm saying like, man, you're not crazy. I know you know you're not crazy, but I'm just saying like, for me, as a testament to what it is you're saying, like that's the same thing it is that my man says when we have lunch. It's verbatim as to what it is you're saying right now, which is crazy.
Well, I kind of want to just point to this. I think this is interesting too, is that I think in the U.S. the feeling of like things are not functioning and things are not working, it's just there's such a high level of anxiety that's like everywhere now. I feel it. I think everyone feels it. And I think how like social, political, economic collapse will play out in different parts of the world is going to be so different. Like here, it's just like we just crossed the 1 million dead mark with COVID in the U.S., which is fucking atrocious, and everyone's numb to it. There was like one article written about it, like this is kind of terrible, right? And then we're all like kind of just like moving through it. The Republican Party is fascist at this point. We had like a kind of clumsy coup attempt on January 6th. We had like all of these things that people are just kind of like, man, this sort of sucks, but like, let's just kind of like, I don't know. There's a really weird feeling in the air here. And you've moved from here to France. I'm sure, like every time I've left the U.S., it just feels like something gets lifted off my shoulders. It just feels better. Like there's something better. It's like there's a certain anxiety that lifts. Like certainly there's other stresses that come with being in a different place, but like it's just different.
But they're worth it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I'm curious, like, you know, because you like obviously were prescient enough to leave for France when I think a lot of people were still like asking questions like, I can't imagine why you would leave. And now I think those questions are less so because it's pretty obvious to the rest of the world. Like,
yeah, nobody thinks I'm either here nor there. Nobody
right.
thinks, at least I'm as crazy. You know, I still get a little grilling from people here sometimes, but at least, you know, something like the abortion thing. I mean, even here, people are like, what? Like they
how
can't,
could that happen?
They cannot conceive.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it makes sense, but it does in a certain kind
and
of
that's the thing, you know, I explain
way.
because they don't understand modern Christian religious tyranny.
Yeah.
You know, the French Revolution got rid of that.
Interesting. That was a long time ago.
I mean, this is the level of secularity that exists in France. I still find shocking after 5 years. But because of it, people don't fear Christianity and people don't carry religious trauma the way that so many Americans who were raised in conservative, fundamentalist, whatever, Christian atmospheres, communities, families carry.
Yeah.
So that kind of things, it's hard for people to understand here. Go ahead.
No, I'm going to interject right here. One of the things that was most traumatic to me was like, you guys know probably better than I do. When you went from Catholicism to Protestantism was because in England, right? Was because fucking King, what's my man's name? Killed his wife because they couldn't get the divorce. King Richard, right? Yep. Not Richard. Jesus Christ.
Henry.
Thank you, sir. King Henry.
I don't know. Yeah.
All right. So this was the only reason it is that my people are Baptists to this day. And we can go through that, and I'm not gonna bogart the conversation. This motherfucker, he was like, who can give me a divorce where I ain't got to be married to this chick, right? So then the Protestants were like, oh man, you know what? we'll give you the out of getting a divorce. Okay, I'm gonna run with it. But this is what happened. And I'll find the documentary and I'll send it to you guys. I love you.
Yeah.
They went from straight Catholicism to Protestantism, and then once you've been like indoctrinated into a certain mindset, you're like, man, I'm fucking with this to the end of the day. So they took these two fucking like priests or whatever the fuck. They took them out there, right? And they disemboweled the motherfuckers and cut their genitalia off, right?
Okay.
After a certain point, you're like, you know what? I like my genitalia. Let's keep it moving. I'm Protestant. I'm Catholic. Catholic tomorrow. I mean, yesterday I'll be Protestant tomorrow. Like I love Patrick. I'm seeing it. I'm looking at his eyes right now. Like if somebody came into his crib right now, like I'm gonna cut your genitalia off. You're like, you know what? Yeah, I gotta keep it rocking. I gotta keep it rocking. You know, you're like, oh, I gotta keep it rocking, right? Yeah. But I'll say this. I'll see my young man because he's my brother. I love this dude more than he knows. I love him. There is a point on this earth where it's not about his genitalia. Right, he's gonna mob up and be ready to go when that time comes. Right, he's gonna be ready to fucking go. I have no doubt about that. But that being said, right now at this moment, to cut his genitalia off.
Hey, Forrest. Hey, Forrest,
hey.
are you drinking those like teas that you like, the cocktail teas?
No, I got water in it.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I got water. No. You gotta understand. Like when I clock in on Monday, I gotta be Forrest Palmer.
Oh, okay. Right.
When I clock out, that's FP.
Oh, okay. Different identity. Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got water. We got water. I can show you my jug right now.
No, I believe you. I'm just asking.
Right.
You're just like more like when we do this is usually in the evening. I feel like it's after you get off your job, so you're just like today is a weekend or it's afternoon here. You have a lot of energy, more than I'm used to.
Well, where I am, it's more peak drinking time, I think.
Yeah.
I get paid to be Forrest Palmer.
Right.
Same as my father.
Yeah.
Right. Now we talking about like some real shit. If you look, I just posted a Facebook picture of my dad holding me as a baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is the reason why that dude that you saw is the reason why we here and we chopping it up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I get paid to be same as my dad. He got paid to be Walter Palmer for however long he's gonna fuck with it. I get paid to be Forrest Palmer. When I clock out nowadays, and I give you they like, man, FP. You're good. They be like, man, blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah. Well,
fine, bro. Like, no. I want. I just wanted to let you know, like, your boy is good to go.
Okay.
I got nothing but water. But I understand. It's an intensity of the thing. Is like, man.
Yeah.
Are you? No. This is just FP. Right.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. I would just say, I just think like 95% of the time we've ever talked has been you right after work or like a work day or a work week, like a work day, right? So
the transition from that. Yeah. She like, oh goddamn, what do? No.
Yeah, you're just there going off. It's great. I love it. Thank you.
It's a Sunday where I gotta worry about tomorrow, but I ain't gotta worry about today. All right.
Gotta sign the waiver next time.
Yeah. There you go. And I'm gonna tell you something. we won't get you asked FP about this that man right there, Michael Sleewa. Look at that man right there. I'm gonna tell you something. All right. Since we're gonna go all in, the reason it is that I love that man right there ain't got shit to do with Guy McPherson. I love that man right there, and I will kill for him.
Oh, great.
As same as anybody on this planet, is because we are cool, because when I talk with him, it was the love that he ingested in me that I can't express in words.
Mm.
He was like, yo, you are my fucking guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't express it in words. I said, me and Guy, we was cool or whatever in the moment. That's a whole other conversation. But when Mike hit me up, I always felt like there was a love involved in it that you can't put it in words. I can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
so
yeah.
So that's what we are. So when I think you like, man, where does the intensity involve? Because you guys know, I'm gonna tell you something. I hit you guys up 30 minutes ago. I said 30 minutes countdown.
You were very excited. You were very excited to jump on here. Yeah.
Were you vibing at that point when you wrote that? Like 26 minutes.
Yeah,
Pickleball Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? Pickleball Jesus. You know, you like whatever the fuck. Man, you know what I put on your face, what I put on your YouTube, right? You know I fuck with you, right?
This podcast took a turn, man.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm sorry, fellas. The young brother asked me a question. I had to answer it in kind. So
yeah. Well, all right.
And you know you
wow. This is such so lively.
You know you my young brother. You know you my young brother. So
yeah. Well,
keep it moving.
Yeah, and you know, I think I feel like, you know, Ali, like you and I have known each other for years now, but you know, it's one of those things, like these connections we're all kind of making right now. It's kind of I'm reading this book right now about like why the internet is terrible. Oh, sorry, Mike, you broke out. You're kind of like you have a choppy connection right now.
That's okay.
You good? Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, just like the internet's terrible for all these reasons, but I've made some of the best like friends and connections around the world as a result of it. So it's this like weird like thing. It's like you can see what's like Facebook's fucked for obvious reasons, but Ali's on there, Forrest is on there, post stuff. I feel like, oh, I've got these friends that are like doing their thing. It's I don't know, it's the dualism of, or whatever the word is, like this sort of, it contains multitudes, and its extremes are really hard to deal with sometimes, because it's like I've thought about like just deleting all my social media, you know, many times.
Yeah. I thought about that myself.
But I won't do it, and I won't do it because there's enough good there that I'm willing to put up with the shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, and I acknowledge that that's personal and an individual and perhaps kind of selfish, because overall what it's doing, like I look at all my relatives who have been brainwashed by Fox News to the point where, you know, they've cut me off, stuff like that. Maybe there's more harm than good in the big picture.
Yeah.
But in my own individual life, as someone with critical thinking skills who also has the power to, you know, block out the fucking QAnon 5G anti-vax cuckoos in my life that I just don't want to listen to anymore. I find overall I get more of a benefit from the internet, from social media, than whatever the word is for lack of benefit, because I don't speak English every day anymore, so sometimes I lose words.
It's like a deficit or something. Disadvantage. Yeah. All right.
A benefit for me than a disadvantage.
Right.
And again, that may not be what it's doing to the world in general. I think there's a legit argument that it's more of a disadvantage than a benefit. especially when you look at like the effects of Facebook on American society and polarization. You know, there's an argument to be had. I don't know which way I'd fall on it, but for my own personal life, I'm willing to put up with a certain amount of bullshit because of exactly what you said, because of the connections I've made on there, because, and especially being someone living overseas, where most people over here who are from where I'm from, they're not my people. Most American expats are not my people. They're here for a very different reason than me. They're in a very different socioeconomic category. They have very different values. You know, I have tons of friends here, but as someone who is and always will be a cultural outsider, despite all the friends I have here, it helps me stay sane to be able to connect to like-minded people over there, because there's a shared experience that even my most politically aware French friends just don't share because they grew up here. So again, you know, kind of like we're talking about, like, you know, like religious tyranny, you know, they don't understand that. They understand that historically. They understand that, you know, the 17th and 18th century in France, the degree to which the like fundamentalist Christians have taken over the United States government is something that they really don't and can't grasp, because that's not their history. So, you know, and again, like I was talking about before, you know, when people here don't understand abortion and why what's happening in the US is happening right now, I have to like take them really far back to get them to understand that, because there's like this huge chunk of material conditions shit that people here just don't understand in terms of how that came to be the United States. So yeah, you know, being on the internet, it kind of it keeps me sane, and it also just kind of keeps me sharp.
Yeah.
And so I do it.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I'm glad that Ollie came on here, because we got to get some goddamn estrogen in this motherfucker, right?
Right.
We got to get some women, because I want to thank you for talking about the whole, and I want to talk about this more. As far as like abortion and women's rights and the whole nine, I can say it as a man, but it needs to be said from a woman more than just me, because this shit is getting out of control, right? It's getting out of control. And if you think it's just the abortion thing, it's gonna go. And you know, Patrick knows I've written about this. If you think it's just that, it's not gonna be more. You got another thing coming.
That's just the beginning.
That's just the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't like it. And I got, you know, I'm a man. I'm a man. Like I'm FC. Yeah. I'm good. Yeah. But that being said, you gotta be down there for your people. And what I'm seeing right now, I don't fucking like.
Yeah. And that's where, you know, I feel almost guilty how, frankly, right now, how protected I am from that, how insulated I am from that. It's kind of weird being an American citizen over here, where if I was over there, I mean, I'm still afraid, but I'm afraid by proxy.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that this stuff won't actually affect me. You know, I almost feel more like a man in the United States, if that makes any sense, just given that it is not my rights that are being threatened. And I understand, you know, I can put myself in the shoes of the women I know in the US, and I get the fear. I mean, and if I was over there, I'd be losing my shit in a serious way. But you know, over here, don't get me wrong, I mean, there's still serious issues around, you know, there's issues around feminism and patriarchy and women's rights and all that stuff worldwide. But that is, I'm very grateful, and I feel kind of guilty, and I realize right now it's a deep privilege to not be personally afraid.
Yeah.
The way that pretty much, you know, any woman that hasn't been brainwashed by the fucking pro-life brainwashing, are afraid right now. They're afraid right now.
Yeah.
And it's a real hardcore, serious fear. And, I do my best to amplify that and, be as supportive as I can from over here. But it is very, I can't even think of the word, strange, bizarre. It's almost kind of a disassociative feeling I have being an American citizen over here. And like watching all that fear on the internet and then going about my day in a country where none of the women here hold that fear. It's this weird juxtaposition between two realities.
And I think what's also weird, just it's not the same thing, but here in the US, because it's so much about individual states' rights stuff, right? So each state has their own approach. So like in Washington State and several other states, it's like it's in the law. Like abortion's kind of protected to a certain degree. So even if the Supreme Court were to go through with what that draft leak shows, which they probably will, but let's just say they do that, certain states, like where I'm from, Idaho and Texas and so many other states, are just gonna like, yep, we're done with abortion's completely banned to varying degrees and severity. But here it's not. So what I have, when you were talking about the fear by proxy thing, is like, yeah, I mean, obviously it's not affecting my body because I have a male body, but I think about people I love and know in Idaho, and I'm like, that state in particular, Idaho. I was just like, several articles have come out, like in the New York Times and the Washington Post, or not Washington Post, but Huffington Post, and several other places are talking about, like, there's like a right wing. The GOP in general is going much further to the right across the U.S., but in certain states, it's like really, really extreme. Like Idaho is one because you have some of the members of Congress and you have the lieutenant governor and all these people that are like straight up associating with white nationalists and militias, whether those are like the Proud Boys and like the 3%ers and these Oath Keepers and shit like that.
They don't hide it anymore. They're just
like,
all out.
The lieutenant governor spoke at or did like a video, like a pre-recorded video thing for, it was, what do they call it? It's like the even more right-wing version of CPAC or the political action, that conference that they have every year.
There is even more. Oh no, you're right. I've heard about
American something.
Yeah.
I can't remember the acronym for it now, but it's like organized by an avowed white supremacist. Like, anyway, she like did a video thing for it, and like, anyway, the point I'm really just trying to make is like, even within the U.S., because of the way things are fracturing along these lines with the abortion issue and other issues as well, there is this strange thing where it's like, it feels like a civil war kind of, or like a balkanization of the U.S. is occurring right now. And I think that might also be difficult to communicate to people like in France or in Europe or in other places where things are more centralized, where there's like national policies that affect everybody across the country. Well, in the U.S., it's like, it depends on where you're fucking living. If you're in New York State, if you're in California, if you're in Washington, if you're in Texas, if you're in, Arizona or New Mexico, it's like, it's going to affect all those people in those states differently based on what happens on the federal level. So that is, I don't know, that's being, I think, much more felt right now across the U.S. And I imagine trying to, like, I don't know if that's a thing that comes up when you talk to French people, like
it does actually, especially, again, I think people get it a little more now, 5 years later, but the moment I decided that I needed to get the fuck out was, I was here when Brexit passed, and no one thought Brexit would pass. And I had a strong inkling that it would.
Yeah.
And even more so than that, what I deeply felt is that, the strength behind that was being underestimated, just as, that was the point where it was becoming obvious in the US that Trump was going to be the candidate. And that's when you started to hear everyone go, oh no, there's no way in hell Trump could win. And I was just reading the mood here in Europe the week before the Brexit vote. And the night before that vote, I remember saying to myself, I think it's going to pass. And if Brexit passes, Trump's going to win. And therefore, if Brexit passes, I'm fucking plotting an exit strategy because I don't want to live in United States under Trump. And that was someone, living in the Pacific Northwest, being surrounded by those militia types.
Yeah.
For a decade, and watching them become more and more bold, and watching them again start to say the quiet parts out loud more and more and more. There's a part of me that's like, Trump's going to open that door, and I don't know how bad it's going to get. I just know, after spending 7 weeks in Europe, and what you were talking about before, feeling that burden, realizing, wow, I'm much healthier and happier and less stressed here. And the cost of living is much lower and the quality of life is much higher. And that's in Obama's America. And I don't think I want to be in Trump's America. But when I would tell people here that, when I got in these discussions with people around Brexit, with me thinking, I think Trump's going to win, their shock was always like, how could a country that voted for Obama twice vote for Trump? And that's what you were just talking about, that balkanization. They could not conceive of that level of division.
Yeah.
And it's not that there's not division here, but again, it's division against the center. Frankly, the division in France is rich versus poor. The division in France is the same division that's always, everyone else, the rich, and people are class conscious for that reason. It's just simple. Whereas, in the United States, people tend to, worship like the worship of billionaires is something I always have trouble explaining to people here too. Why do people think Jeff Bezos is a good guy? Why do people think Elon Musk is a good guy? It's really hard for them to understand, because here it's just understood rich people are bad. And that's why we were making them pay a wealth tax. That was the social contract. We let them keep their heads if they gave away an enormous portion of their income to fund everything that makes France a nice place to live.
Right.
But it's funny because, the states' rights thing puts me in a really interesting position here. One of the biggest complaints, related in part to the bureaucracy we were talking about before, is the degree of centralization here in France. Yeah. Now, me as an American, it's something else. It's a constant mindfuck. The fact that, driver's laws are the same everywhere. Job laws are the same everywhere. Rental laws are the same everywhere. There is absolutely nothing that changes when you cross the equivalent of a state border, a regional border. Mm-hmm. It is all the same. And for me, as someone who, lived in a country where I had to, change my driver's license 4 times and take a test 4 times, and, with a small business, having to move a state and having to learn an entire new system every single time of registration and sales tax and this, it was such an amazing relief to me. Like, wow, no, y'all don't understand how cool it is that it's all the same no matter what. You can move from Limousin to Bretagne and you don't have to learn or do or change a fucking thing. But it's interesting because the idea of shifting power from centralization to regionalization is actually an extremely popular idea amongst the left here. Yeah. And it's one of the few things that I kind of I understand why, and there's a different history behind it. And, as we've seen in the US, regional control can be great or wonderful depending on who's in charge. Mm-hmm. Right? That's why Vermont's a very different place to live than Idaho. It all depends on who's in charge. Mm-hmm. But, especially living somewhere, I live in, what is arguably disputed territory with a very, very longstanding and militant separatist movement who, there's a spectrum of that movement that varies from wanting to completely break off from France and become a separate nation over to, a more moderate position, which is the more popular position, which is to have regional control, which is not to be controlled by Paris, which is to have much more local control. I understand why they want that, but as an American, I'm like,
yeah, I know.
Hold on. Let me ask a question. Because I'm American. I grew up South Central Los Angeles, 19 days. I'm going back in the day. Do you think that it's better to be France, or do you think like locally that it could fix whatever the things that are going on there right now? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like I grew up in Los Angeles. Can I say that, oh, well, it would have been all correct if everybody in Los Angeles would just take care of it shit or just California or at a federal level? I've had to think about that myself. So with you, I'm asking like, yeah. I think
it
you
all
understand
has
where
to
I'm
do
going.
with what the collective values of any given people or place or region is. That's the hinge to me.
Okay.
And the thing about the United States that I've always felt, one of the reasons it's so dysfunctional is because you don't have a collective identity. Or have. It's too big. And the degree to which it's been, the manner in which the United States was settled, which was super fast, with different groups of people, with different aims, with different goals, with it was the chaotic nature of it. While we're talking about the fracturing, the balkanization, that's always existed. It's just more relevant than ever because it's been exploited to the point where it's worse than ever. But you look at the history of the United States, you've always had this very, very deep divide, and it's a much deeper divide than you've ever had here in France, where the divide has pretty much always been like the bourgeoisie and the ruling class versus everyone else.
Yeah.
So, for me, whether it's centralization or regionalization, where you're putting, it's all about who you're putting the reins of power into, what hands those are, and what values guide those hands. France as a central power does not concern me as much as the United States is. I can't imagine what the United States would have been as a central power under Trump, for example. States' rights almost, in many ways came to advantage under Trump because states were to an extent able to push back and resist against what he was trying to do. I'm not a big fan of states' rights in general, both because of the history of it but for me, when I look at the differences between here and there, it's the level of secularism and a much more coherent sense of shared values in France that makes both the idea of centralization and the theoretically idea of regionalization in most places a safer bet. But, we do have the same tendencies here where there are certain regions that, and, my region is not necessarily one of them. We're actually the most left-wing part of the country altogether. But, there's certain regions of the country that I would fear what would happen to the more vulnerable people there under a policy of regional control. The Southeast, for example, which is the stronghold of Marine Le Pen, of the Front National.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see a situation where those regions had regional control and could challenge and or overrule what comes down from Paris. Here, on the other hand, this is a region that has been historically oppressed by Paris over the course of 500 years and has an extremely ugly history. And also is left wing currently. But the thing is, it hasn't always been left wing. And it probably won't always be left wing. So, when people agitate for regional control here, my position on it is, look, current material conditions, yeah, sure. You've got, the people in charge right now are definitely more progressive than Paris. They have your best interests at heart. There is much more of a hardcore militant left-wing mentality here. But historically, actually, this has been a pretty conservative region. These are the folks who fought against the French Revolution. Brittany was the highest concentration of those who collaborated with the Nazis during World War II. We also have a long history of swinging from the far left to the far right. So, my issue with regionalism, the idea of it taking hold here is based on what I see in the US, where, whether that's a really good thing or a really bad thing completely depends on who's in charge and the values they hold. You can have a Vermont or you can have a Texas.
Yeah.
I live in Texas. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So, and I wouldn't want to be able to see the kind of things happen regionally in France, the way you see the policies happen where you cross a border and you lose a fundamental right to control your body, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, I'll say this. I'm gonna go into work on Monday, and what my young brother didn't understand is like I can be expressive now. When I go into work on Monday, I can't be expressive. Everything that you said is what I have to deal with on a daily basis. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But everything it is you saying is 100% correct. So I appreciate that, and you laying it down in the whole nine.
Well,
let me. I want to question because I rarely get a chance to talk with an American who is an expatriate to another place. Are you happy?
Oh yeah.
Good.
I have no regrets.
Good.
It's hard
Good.
sometimes.
Yeah.
There's definitely, it's kind of like a video game. Like I'm doing good, and all of a sudden, beam, doing good.
Yeah, shit happens. Yeah.
There's constant potholes. There's constant struggles. It's very weird being somewhere where you will always be the outsider no matter what. It's a really, especially interesting for me as a white-skinned immigrant, to be assumed and treated like everyone else until the moment I open my mouth and they hear my accent.
Yeah.
And that's something that will never change. As someone who learned French in their 30s, I will never not have an accent. That's something I'll have to deal with the rest of my life. And it brings everything from the person who loves the United States and thinks they're the greatest country on the earth, from the person who's going to deny me a job because they hate Americans. And you never know. It's just a fucking like dodgeball being thrown at you every time I open my mouth. Yeah. And that is something I probably will never completely get used to. That being said, if I could do anything over in how I left and why I left and when I left, I would change nothing except maybe not get rid of certain things that I didn't know I couldn't replace here. But that's just like very personal and petty. And frankly, I did it just in time because I would not have been able to get out in the specific way I did even 1 year later, because so many people did it at the same time that the government here tightened the regulations to make sure there were less of me. Yeah. So I'm also deeply grateful for not only it's still possible, but I was able to slip through loopholes that don't exist anymore. Yeah.
I think you
I don't know if I could have done it.
Today,
I think we were talking once, Allie, we were chatting about like if I ever wanted to leave the US, you mentioned like Portugal as a good option for US citizens wanting to figure out a way to live in Europe. Is Portugal still like a good exit strategy for people who can afford it, at least? I mean, we're talking about like serious, like there's some serious economic concerns here, but like financial concerns, I should say. But like, I don't know.
They're definitely still the most welcoming to, Americans. As long as you have enough money to support yourself, they're still the most welcoming. But even Portugal has tightened the belt somewhat on the amount of people they allow in and the requirements, mostly because of the effect that it's had on the housing market, on the rental market, and the effect that the influx, and it's not only Americans, it's Brits too. And it's because, Brexit happening at the same time of Trump meant that you had this exodus of Americans going into Europe. And then, British nationals had, 2 years where they could slip through a loophole without being treated like someone from outside the European Union. And a whole lot of them took advantage of that. And the vast majority of them landed in France, Spain, or Portugal. So, that's, going back to like me with the accent, right? One of the funny things that I'll end up dealing with here, which resolves in my favor, interestingly enough, especially in the countryside in Brittany, is people assuming I'm British. And then as soon as I tell them I'm American, I'm fine. Because this part of France has been specifically, frankly, colonized by Brits who bought up cheap property.
Yeah, I got you.
Over. Yeah, you have towns in central Brittany where like 20 to 30% of the population is from the UK. And they never learned French. And they are seen kind of like as this foreign invasion, but the kind with money, the kind you can't get rid. It's not like the immigrants from Syria. The problem is these are the folks who own all the houses, who actually economically improved the area But when you walk into like the local sports bar, people are speaking English, not French, and the locals don't like, and it's, you know, it's a devil's bargain. It's like their property prices have risen, but they feel under threat culturally. So me being American and not British in this region specifically actually comes to my advantage. It's super weird. It's
interesting.
I'm not one of those Brexit Brits who lives here because I bought a house for 20,000 euros in the middle of Bumblefuck Brittany.
Right.
But Portugal.
So why did you go to France?
Why did I go to France? Because partially because I fell in love specifically with the city I live in now, and the people here. It was the first time I was in a place that I felt truly reflected my values. And also at the time, you know, I was living in Portland, not, you know, going deeper into debt every month just to survive. And as a self-employed person, I calculated the cost of living here and was like, you know, the way things are going in the US, and that was even without Trump. I mean, even before Trump.
Long before Trump. I got that.
The little amount of money I make, I could live a much better life here. And then it was the Brexit vote that made me do it, because I was like, I don't want to be nearly homeless under a Trump administration. It's hard enough being nearly homeless under an Obama administration.
Very.
But unfortunately, you know, gentrification's hit here. You know, the little house I'm living in right now is going to be demolished next April to build a huge, horrible, ugly building because gentrification. So it's hitting here too. It's hitting, you know, it's a global issue, but it is specifically an issue in Portugal. Just to get back to what we were talking about, Patrick, like Lisbon, it's horrible. And it's Americans who have devastated the housing market there. So the Portuguese government is not severely, but little by little instituting more and more restrictions on Americans who want to come over, just because of the impact it's having on working class and poor Portuguese people.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm gonna ask a question. Do you think that it is not even accepted? I'm trying to think about the right verb, but you know how shit is fucked up we over here in the United States, right? You went over there to France. How long do you think it's gonna be where it's so fucked up where you can't go someplace else?
Hold on a second. I'm gonna get some water and then I'll answer.
I got you.
I gotta think about it for a second. That's a It's hard to put a time frame on that.
I said think. I didn't say no. I said think. Right.
Yeah, and I'm thinking. I've thought about it. No, you are not the first person to ask me this. I've thought about it greatly. I will say it has everything to do with who ends up in charge next presidential round. I do think it is the goal of the GOP to make it as hard for you to leave as possible.
Oh, right. In the U.S., right.
Hold up. I'm gonna say this, and I want to hear you guys' response. So, right here, right now, the breadbasket is Jesus Christ, it's God damn it. What is the I'm getting old. I'm 49 years old, bro. I'm getting old. It's the breadbasket of America runs from Texas, North Texas, all the way up to like goddamn Minnesota,
like North Dakota.
All right. What is the fucking glacial aspect that allows us to be able to get our food right now?
What is the
it's the the it's not being replenished. It's a fucking
the water, the aquifers,
hold up, the Agala aquifer, right? Yes. So that's what keeps us alive. 50, yeah. I mean, this is Saturday. I mean, it's Sunday, man. I'm fucking tired at this juncture. I'm trying to get myself together, going to work on Monday, right? So, seriously, the Agala aquifer has about 30, maybe 20 years left in it. Seriously, fellas, and lady. What's going to happen when that's gone? Right? Like we fuck around and we talk that shit.
Fucked.
Yeah, we're fucked. We're fucked. So Ollie, you said, okay, it depends on who's elected. No matter who's elected, they can't control that.
Yeah. But I'm just talking about whether you'll be allowed to escape or not. That's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
So I feel like
I got you.
Yeah. Whoever's elected. Yeah. No, it's not gonna. I mean, things like water crisis and climate change. You're fucked no matter what. There's no. Biden ain't gonna solve that shit. The Democrats aren't gonna solve that shit. They're gonna pretend to solve that shit because they know it gets them votes. But long term, it does not look good no matter what. What I'm looking at though is your freedom of movement. Will you be able to run away?
But what if we start right now?
Go. No, my pickleball Jesus. I'm always going to fight him.
If we start right now, we could turn it all around, right?
Yeah. We could do it. If we just vote and turn this shit around and recycle.
It'll get figured out.
That's it, right?
Yeah. Hey, I remember being told that in fifth grade.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Well, I actually want to, I think this is kind of, unless Mike or Forrest, you have a final question, I think I just want to make a final point. Because I think, Allie, I think you made a decision that I wish I could have made or did make or whatever at some point. And in some ways I did. I moved to Washington State, which I think is a really good decision for me. But like, my point is that no matter where you go on the planet, all the things we just mentioned, like depletion of water, climate disruption, all the things that are happening, these are global. So it's like the questions that I think
we're fucked here too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and so, obviously no matter where you go, I think particularly like, France or the United States, we were talking about right-wing forces that are trying to, take the reins of, take control of the positions of power in these countries and, come up with some kind of almost eco-fascist response to climate disruption, right? So we have to fight that because obviously you don't want to spend the last several decades on Earth, like dealing with a fascist takeover. That's just obviously not ideal, but regardless of where we're at on the Earth, it's gonna suck. So I think I think that's the thing that we all have to ask ourselves that are coming to terms with this or have come to terms with this future that's unravel or unfolding before us is like, where do you want to be? If you can go somewhere, where would you go? Is it here? Do you want to be, and everyone has their reasons for why they want to stay where they're at. It's understandable. Like I'm sure, Allie, you have. I'm sure you wish you could bring people from the U.S. there, or like that there's some way that, everybody could be that you love could be all together right now. It's like we all have to make these kind of unfortunate calculations of where do we want to be right now and in the coming decades so that we can write it out the best that we possibly fucking can. Like I'll say like one thing that comes up over and over again is Mike made a decision years ago to move to an intentional community, kind of live a little more off grid. Obviously he's using the internet, he's house sitting right now, but like it seems like every time that we like record an episode, he's borrowing somebody's internet connection more or less. And so him and his wife made the decision like years ago, like we just don't want to do this anymore. We're gonna try to get out, the best that we can. Forrest is doing the best he can where he's at. I am too, and you too. I mean, it's just like a theme in a lot of the people we bring onto this podcast is to be like, where do we want to be right now as things unravel, And
one thing I would stress that, I made the decision I did in part because of the situation, but also in part because of my own personal situation where, I had nothing to lose by leaving.
Yeah. Right.
And I had nothing to gain by staying.
Right.
I didn't have a job. I didn't have kids. I didn't own property. I didn't have a 401k. I didn't have anything holding me there, keeping me there. And so for me personally, kind of just what you're saying, I kind of made a risk benefit analysis and said, look, it's all going to shit anyway. Where am I going to be in the best position to ride it out the best I can? It's not going to be in the Pacific Northwest as someone on the verge of poverty. Yeah. Spending the time that I spend here, specifically in the city, specifically in this region, before I made that decision, that's what made me realize, I could be better off writing it out here. It was a guess I made. And 5 years later, I definitely feel that it's true. But, but that's me personally. If I had been more middle class, if I had owned a farm in the country somewhere in the US, if I had had more security there, it may have made more sense for me to write it out there. It was a combination of the geopolitical situation, but also my own personal economic situation. And also, the community ties that I had forged here. So many Americans who leave, and it's heartbreaking because the Americans that I do meet over here who, are more like me, who aren't like wealthy retired people. They're very often very isolated and very much without community because they kind of ran away from something, but not to something. I was extremely fortunate in that I ran to something. I had made a community of friends, of people here. I had people to come to. Yeah. When I made this decision, I was able to reach out to those friends and be like, hey, if I show up with 2 suitcases, do you have a couch? Do you have a backyard? Do you have a friend who needs a roommate? I had a pre-existing network that I was able to build. Yeah. And, one of the things that distinguishes me from most other Americans I meet here is that, and I hate to even use this language because it's like the fucking government language, but I've assimilated into the community here. Yeah. And most Americans that I speak to, they tend to be lonely. They tend to be isolated. They tend to have no one except either their other expat immigrant friends, whoever, or the case of Americans who married French nationals, they're overly dependent on their spouse, and that's all who they have. So, for me, in terms of writing it out, part of the reason I decided to write it out here is because I had a community of people I could rely on. And, the way that I fell into that was pure luck, was pure chance, was nothing I did. It was just something I fell into. But when the opportunity falls in front of you, you fucking take it. And so I took it. And so, I am kind of in a unique situation. And if there had been aspects of my reality that were different, I very well may have stayed in the United States. I probably would have left Portland. I don't recommend Portland to anybody, but I would have, there were other, and there were other things I was thinking of, and maybe I can go to Pittsburgh, maybe I can go to Asheville, I know some cool people here, there, whatever. So but that's, what you're saying is, we all need to pick the hill we can defend ourselves the best on, Yeah. And for me, it was here, but it's not here for everybody, and everyone's got their own personal mix of whatevers. That your own personal equation of what you need to survive and where you're going to do it best. To me, the important thing is like, let's just acknowledge it's fucking falling apart and we're all going to need to be in that mentality. Like, that's where I get scared, is how many people are just like la-di-di dying their day, not realizing, one good thing about being here is I feel like, people here are much more focused on just the average person, like the idea of being a collapse mentality. That's not a fringe mentality here. The average librarian believes we're about to collapse too. It's like, it's something that people are much more aware of here. And so that really helps me a lot too.
Oh, but I'm going to ask a question, because you lived in the United States, right? So now you're in France. So you're saying like people over there, like one of my guys, and he's from France, my man John Baptiste. They don't even know. I love these guys more. I have lunch with this cat every month. Excuse me. He's like, man, we're chopping it up about all the shit that's going. Like, man, it's about to get fucked up, right? Like he's white dude. There, he's like probably 20 years younger than I am. He's like, man, it's gonna get fucked up. So, but when I'm talking with my man JB, he's like, just like not mad about it, just like that is the ultimate culmination of everything that's going on in the world. So, where you at right now, what you're telling me is like that is the norm, or is it the distance from most people in France?
It's more of the norm. It is a view that is much more accepted. But I mean, there's literally a word for it: collapsology. Like it's spoken about like a political philosophy.
Wow,
There's there's two authors here. Pablo Sevigny is the one. I forget the other. They published a series of books about it. They've been published into English. I can find the names for you for the books in English. But those books were bestsellers here in France.
Wow.
And so the idea of collapse is something that it's not. I wouldn't say it's something that everybody believes and accepts, but it's something that everybody knows about. It's on the mainstream radar. And it's something that there's a much more of a widespread acceptance amongst people who otherwise I wouldn't say are radical.
Yeah.
Than in the United States, where it's much more of a fringe belief.
Yeah.
Here, you're much more likely to come across like the equivalent of a soccer mom with 2 kids in a nice house and a husband who works, in real estate, who doesn't show any signs of being left-wing anything. But if you get in a political discussion with them, they will acknowledge collapse.
Yeah, that's coming. Yep, I got you.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, much more common.
Well, I think that's a good place to end the conversation. I'm in a room that's getting increasingly hot. It's actually like spring has come finally to the Pacific Northwest.
Aww.
It's beautiful. It's actually sunny, which is wonderful. Which my partner and I were talking about how because it gets so cloudy half the time at least, when spring comes, it's like such a fucking dramatic shift.
Oh yeah, the weather here is the same as the weather there.
Yeah, and the mood, everybody's mood is just like we're just like, oh man, like this is fucking amazing.
Oh, yeah. But it comes earlier. It happens the same thing here, but it happens 6 weeks earlier here than there. So we're past that.
Right. Yeah.
But I hear, it's usually around like the 1st of April where all of a sudden the sun comes out and everyone like wanders out of their house.
Yeah.
Like that Ray Bradbury story where there's only one sunny day in 7 years.
Yeah.
And of course here, because it's France, everyone just like brings wine and beer and goes to sit outside everywhere. And it's like a countrywide block party the first sunny day. But yeah, it's very much the same. Now it's like pretty much summer here. Now we've truly shifted. Yeah, it's like
hold up before we get off, because this was, and I'm glad that you're here. And I want Ollie, if you want to, always gonna fuck with me and our Godcast podcast. But this was your show, and I'm glad that you came on because it can't just be about us as men on this earth. Because I want to know how you feel about everything. What about the Roe versus Wade change, everything it is that's going on out here.
Well, we'll do another one. I'll talk to you all whenever.
Oh yeah. Well, they know, these guys know I love them more than life itself. So we always gonna be on here.
I mean, even though
my man,
I'll just say, even though like in a way we were kind of like asking you questions, Allie, like the idea I feel with this podcast specifically is, we wanted to introduce you to people that listen, but also and to these guys, to Mike and Forrest, but like we wanted to just be like a group discussion. So like, if like you wanted to ever just jump on and like, I don't know, like just have people show up we have a few other friends that jump on occasionally. And like, if we add other people into the mix, it's just like a group discussion. So like, again, this was about kind of getting to know you more.
As long as you don't mind shift, I know you had to shift your time slot.
Oh, yeah. We have to
9 hours ahead of you.
It's fine.
Clearly it works for two of us.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna
Forrest and myself.
I'm going to interject this. I mean, that's my man right here. He don't even know how much I love him. He knows I love him, but he don't know how much. That's a whole other conversation. There you go. Keep pumping your hands. Now I'm gonna ask you something, Ollie. What do you think about what's going on in Ukraine, and how is that going to end?
That's a huge fucking question.
Yep. I'm asking her.
That's another 2 hours,
yeah,
man.
keep it in. No. Can I say one thing? Let's do the thing that they do on like news broadcasts and like Democracy Now, where Amy Goodman's like, okay, we got 60 seconds. What do you think about the situation in Ukraine? You've got 60 seconds. Answer it, and then people are just like,
okay.
Wait. Like, how can I answer that?
I fucking love this kid.
Okay, I'm gonna try my best.
Yeah, I
can
time it.
60 seconds, okay,
I'm gonna time it.
Yeah, whatever.
And I'm gonna have to specify that I'm coming at it from someone who lives in a historically internally colonized region. Okay. What especially American leftists aren't getting about Ukraine is that you are dealing with a historical situation of internal colonization. And Americans are looking at NATO and they're looking at the United States. And yes, we can say NATO is bad, right? But what the whole, like, I see two things on the left. I see just like this, like, just kind of tanky shit where people are believing the whole Nazi line and identifying hardcore with Russia. And yes, it's the whole thing, like the enemy of your enemy is not your friend. And I feel like leftists are romanticizing Putin and making too much of, they're greatly underestimating. They are not seeing the colonization aspect of it, which is something here in Europe we are super, super sensitive to. And here's the thing about NATO. It's like, I'm anti-NATO the way I'm anti-police and anti-prison, right? If we open all the prison gates tomorrow and fire all the cops tomorrow without putting a system in place first to mitigate the effects of that, it ain't going to end well. You abolish NATO tomorrow, it ain't going to end well. NATO sucks, but NATO exists for a reason. And what Russia has done to Ukraine is showing us why NATO exists. And if we want to get rid of the United States imperialism, if we want to get rid of institutions such as NATO, we have to work on the root issues, and we have to not ignore the historical loop-de-loo that's at play.
That's pretty good.
I tried.
1 minute, 25 seconds. This is good.
I will say this, and then I'm gonna get off the mic. I put this on Facebook, right? I said that most people are trying to look at the whole Russia, Ukraine thing with World War II mentality. World War I was a lot different. If you ever read about it, know about it was much different. And we're trying to have the same mentality when it comes to what's going on now with World War II mentality. It's not about black and white. What you just said right there was the best leftist explanation as to everything that's going on. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
And that was good.
We can elaborate on that more in the future if you like.
Yeah. No,
for now, we've been going for like 2 hours now. Maybe we should.
Yeah. No, this is where it gets for me. I run out of fuel about 2 hours, and it's also really late for you, Ali. I just want to be mindful.
It's 10:30 here. Yeah, I just picked some kale. I want to cook it. So.
Go eat it. Go cook it.
Go do your thing.
Thanks for coming on, Ali. It was really
and again, let's I'm totally happy to do this again. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye. All right.
Hey, man, that was the best explanation I've seen from a leftist perspective when it comes to what's going on. Seriously, bro.
Yeah. No,
that shit was that was
great.
it. That's the best culmination. I like. Yep.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I really like Ali. I've known her for. I can't believe we met. I first interviewed her in 2017, I guess. So, it's kind of wild, 5 years or whatever it's been since I first met her. But yeah, I think she was a great fit. So, anyway, thanks for coming on.
Wait. I want to talk pickleball Jesus.
Oh my God.
Where's he at? Pickleball Jesus.
God. Yeah.
Right. Hey, that's my guy right there, man. You know your boy. I'm subscribed to your fucking YouTube.
I know. I don't know if Patrick has though.
I subscribed to your YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. I'm trying to get over 300 today, so
I subscribed the earliest days. I was like, I follow that.
Man.
You're very professional about it. I'm kind of like, you just like really.
Hey,
it's good.
Pickleball Jesus. I mean, when I see. I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you guys, bro, because I love all you guys. When you guys are happy, I'm happy. To be quite honest with
you. Yeah.
All right. When I see you doing the pickleball thing, man, and you're happy, I'm looking in your eyes when you're doing those YouTube videos. I'm happy. Seriously, bro. Seriously, bro.
Yeah.